when we look at sort of the idea of a lot of these blockbusters that we see in the movie theaters, there's a lot of CG elements, right? We have a lot of computer animation, avatars, the How to Train Your Dragons, and then even just some of the action films. There's a lot of CG elements going into this. Now, I think one of the sort of mysteries and some of the tough things when it comes to being a live action filmmaker or even an animation filmmaker is budgeting, right? Like, how do we budget for this, and how much do we need to budget? And so there's a bit of a mystery behind some of this stuff. And hopefully, like, if a filmmaker comes to you or an agency comes to you and says, I need this much animation, I need this much, like, how do you deal with budgeting, and how do you, because I know, Mario, you own a studio, and Martin's worked as a producer, and Emily, you've worked obviously on shorts and for studios. You know, do you know how you deal with sort of the budgeting question? Because, like, you know, a filmmaker might come to me and say, I've got a 5-minute film, I need 2 minutes of animation. Make it work, right? Well, I'm like, well, how much? How much do you have? Because I might have to hire, you know. So how do you deal with that issue of budgeting? And why is it so much for animation sometimes?
Yeah, okay, so yesterday I was preparing a budget, so this is good question, it's pretty fresh. So what I always do now, because I wasn't doing that before, but you learn after a couple of mistakes, a couple of years, a couple of decades. So what I do now, I just go by the hour. I see what they want, and because of the experience that I have now, I know how long it's going to take. So I sit down with the client and I say, well, that's going to take, and in my head I'm like, that's like 2 days. I said, 3 days. So I go like that, and I just write it down, and then 3 days mean, you know, 8 hours a day, that means 24 hours, and then you have the rate for the hour. You have, like now I have a rate for the studio, because you have different things. You have a really nice overhead that you need to pay, so that's a different rate. So when you are alone, you just need to know the rate, your rate. You know, when you're making money and when you're not going to be making money. So I have also that range about saying, so this is how much the studio rate would be, and then this is how little that I would not be able to make it. So I have that range here. I don't let them know. That's me only. And then I just go, you know, keep on going on that basis, saying, okay, so this is how long it's going to take to model, this is how long it's going to take for the rigging and then animation, and just at the end, you know, just add it all up. Simple. Simple, but doesn't work at the end. Because they always come, well, you know, that sounds like, can you let's say you say 5,000, like what this guy said, well, it's going to be like about 5,000. And then he said, well, what can you do for 3,000? Okay, so we can maybe go to a different animation technique, you know, and then instead of having this really fluid animation, we just go and do something like this, and I have samples, and I show them how something like that. You know, this could be done in 2 weeks instead of 1 month. It just goes faster, and he's like, doesn't look as good as the other one. So yeah, it just keeps on going, but it's just a matter of always, I guess, educating the client on things, because there's always all these extras, and that's important, because the extras, that's when you start losing money. And one thing that I do now is just to specify the payments. I'm always like 50% in advance. They never go for that, but you always have to say 50% in advance, and you just go like this. If they say no, you just say, I can't do it. And then you just go, depending on the duration, if it's just a week or something like that, you can wait. But if it's something that's going to go, like for the film now, that thing's going to go for 3 months. So you need to have some installments, payments, and saying that you're not going to wait for the approvals, because sometimes they just take a long time to approve the shots, and you can't be financing that because you have to pay, you know, the employees and the rent and all that. So you just make that really clear and make sure that's on the agreement. And even though it's on the agreement, they come and fight with you. So it's fun.
I was going to say, my favorite, when I'm talking to a client, I always use, this is so cheesy, but I use a triangle, right? On this triangle, on each of the ends and points of the triangle is a word. Good, fast, cheap. You as the client can pick 2, but you cannot have the other. So therefore, and as a rule of thumb, I do not work fast and I do not work cheap, because you will not get good. right? And I think it's a reputation for the work I do. I don't want something to be bad, right? So if you want it fast, it's not going to be cheap. If you want it good and you want it cheap, it's not going to be fast, right? So I think a client needs to know there's limitations to what we're doing, obviously. And, you know, as the animator, we have to protect ourselves a little bit because obviously we know that they're going to come back at some point and say, oh, I don't like this, please revise this. And we know that there needs to be that safety net, right? Especially for the animator. So Emily, have you dealt with the same sort of issues?
Well, since I've been working more for studios, I've had my leads cover me for the clients. But maybe more for students in animation, for me the experience of budget was more my own planning, my own scheduling. And I find that a lot of students, a lot of my friends weren't considering that enough. It's so important to plan your stuff in advance. Think about how long it might take you to do your film, your entire film. Go through all your shots and have an estimate of how long it could take you to do these shots. And also have a buffer. For me, when I did my little short film, I made sure that I had like 2 weeks at the end of my school, like before school would end, I'd had 2 weeks of nothing because I knew something would happen at some point. It could have been me being sick, it could be a computer problem, anything. Snowstorm, because I was in Montreal. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, plan ahead.
And as an animation producer at the AMFB for what, 4 years, how do you deal with that question of budgets and money and all that good stuff?
Well, it's not easy, and what I think Mario's rules of thumb is true. You know, you figure out how much it's. I actually lost pulling hair out trying to figure out how do I figure this out, and I came up with a formula that I thought was fair because in my former life as a freelancer I could give workshops or seminars on how to lose a lot of money, how to underbid. That's the 5 gold stars on how to underbid. So that's always been a kind of an anxiety of mine is what does it really cost? And inevitably what happens is you figure out a budget and you bring it to the executive producer and the answer is do it for this amount. That's way too much. The studio can't afford that. And in fact, I find that to be quite an interesting challenge because then you back right up to the designs, the point of design, and you start designing your animation and your story for that budget. And I feel that that's a good way to work, actually. You have $100, make your film for $100, and try not to. I think what's really important, whatever you do, is to set a personal challenge that for this amount of money, I'll do it for this amount of money, but I'll do something interesting, something that is satisfying to me. If I had a $500 budget and it was trimmed down to $100, there is one thing or one component that I will keep so that it's artistically satisfying. But animation is very expensive. I'd say, a lot of people would say that the only other art form that's more expensive than film is architecture, that kind of thing. In order to make work and to continue to do work, we have to work with with changing budgets. The key thing, Emily is right, is the contingency, is to include that and to really think things through and don't say that you can do something where you haven't really thought about it, because it would dig yourself a big, deep hole that's very difficult to get out of.
Yeah, yeah.
I just remember one thing that was really nice for me is that like all my life I went to art school. And I was, I'm hoping not to be a starving artist anymore, And I remember that changed one day when I was offered a contract in a local studio for a film. And something, when I was going through the agreement, I was like, you know, this just doesn't sound right, you know. There was something in that agreement that just not clicked. And that was when I started, like, I guess, balancing the passion for animation and then also looking at the other side. So from that day, I was a new Mario. An important note was that I started looking for business mentors, and I found one in SFU. I was there on the, they have business classes and all that, so I was like, you know, these guys, they know something that I should know. You know, all these business people. And business, to me, was very hard to, you know, to take, because I was always like, stay away from it. You know, you kind of see them like evil people, but then from that day I was like, no, there's something that I need to know from these guys. So I have one mentor from SFU that he sees my stuff and he sees all the budgets and he saw that, and he knows my situation. And then I enrolled in a course from San Francisco, actually. I have another coach that I tell him with the movie, I say, well, you know, these guys are saying that would be this amount of money, I budgeted for this, and these are the payments and all that. And they're really they're just business people, and they say things in a way just to make money, just to make money. That's the attitude from these guys, and I think it's really good to counterbalance our passion. So again, it's just coaches. I'm getting into that mode about that. Now that I have the studio, you need to know things about business, you know, because you're not talking to animators, you're talking to producers. And those guys, at the beginning, they were like, blah, 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 blah. I was like, what does he mean? You know, what's a P&A? What does he mean with that? But you just get lost and confused. So it's important that you get that, you know, knowledge, again, just to know what you're doing.
Gotta know Excel.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's true. And as a short filmmaker, you wear all the hats, right? You know, in the feature film world, you have, you know, hundreds of some people that are going to be doing specific tasks. On a short film, your budget doesn't really warrant that you're going to have all these people. So a lot of times when I make a short, I am producer, writer, director, editor, blah, 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 blah. And you're right, you know, but the problem is animators should never work out their own budgets or, you know, be that person, because essentially we should be in charge of the creatives. So Mario's right. You know, it's very difficult for, I think, for animators in the beginning to negotiate wages, contracts, etc., because, you know, maybe we're shy people. I'll always say yes, right? So I think it's always important to partner with someone. If you can't do it, partner with a producer, or partner with someone or a manager or somebody who's going to negotiate your contracts for you, or be the bad cop, and you can be the good cop, right? I think that helps your relationship with a client or with a filmmaker or a live action filmmaker as well, right? I think that's pretty safe to say that sometimes it's, you know, we can wear many hats, but that might not be a good hat to work with. You know, this is why there's producers and there's directors and there's executive producers and such, right? So